Nostalgia remembers the 80s as steady Saturday mornings, same heroes, same catchphrases. But look closer and you'll find shows that swerved mid-series. Tones flipped darker, sidekicks took over, networks meddled, and entire casts vanished. Today, we're counting down 15 80s cartoons that reinvented themselves on the fly, sometimes to chase trends, sometimes to dodge censors, and sometimes to survive. Let's roll the tape and rewind the mutations. Inspector Gadget, 1983 to 1986. Inspector Gadget began as a clever slapstick send-up of spy shows, with Penny's brains and Brain's disguises secretly solving each case while the bionic buffoon bumbled through. Mid-series, though, the formula shifted. Season 2 introduced Cape Man, a caped teen superfan who latched onto Gadget like an overeager apprentice. On paper, it was a way to freshen chemistry and create broader, cartoonier gags. In practice, episodes increasingly bent around Cape Man's antics, catchphrases, bravado, and misfires, reducing the screen time and quiet competence that made Penny and Brain the show's heartbeat. The tonal balance tilted from spy spoof to louder, loopier sitcom energy. Behind the scenes, syndication demands were ruthless, more episodes, faster. Adding a new comedic foil was a production shortcut. He could carry scenes, simplify blocking, and bridge cheaper setups. But fans noticed the alchemy fading. Dr. Claw's menace softened, traps got sillier, and the once sly rhythm. Penny tracks a clue, Brain sabotages danger, Gadget gets the credit, lost its snap. Some gags were even trimmed down for broadcast safety, with less realistic weaponry and softer consequences to satisfy network standards. International edits further toned down bits of slapstick. Even so, the show's influence remained huge. Inspector Gadget's theme became an earworm for a generation. Go Go Gadget embedded itself in playgrounds, and the bumbling hero still captured imaginations. The Cape Man detour, though, is remembered as a turning point, a reminder of how a small character tweak can ripple across tone, pacing, and the very soul of a show. Beetlejuice, 1989 to 1991. Tim Burton's manic ghoul became a kid's cartoon miracle. Same anarchic spirit, but playful rather than predatory. Early episodes thrived on surreal sight gags, punny portals, and that sweet friendship between Lydia and her chaotic best fiend. Then came the split-run reality. Episodes produced for ABC aired alongside a slate for Fox. The change wasn't just logos. Tone and priorities diverged. On one side, episodes leaned into big, bouncy comedy with brisk, gag-density storytelling. On the other, you'd see more school-day arcs, gentler emotional beats, and Lydia's grounded humanity tugging Beetlejuice's mischief toward empathy. The writing reframed Beetlejuice, from pure agent of chaos to flawed buddy who, sometimes, tries to do right. Aesthetic shifts, color palettes, pacing, beats, and secondary character emphasis made it feel like two related shows airing at once. Broadcast standards also played their role. Gross-out gags, underworld imagery, and jokes about death were carefully softened for certain time slots, while some international edits went further, trimming whole lines or changing outcomes of pranks to seem less harmful. Still, the dual tone gave Beetlejuice staying power. It proved that a single character could thrive under two radically different creative lenses, and it remains a cult example of how production pipelines shape identity mid-run. The Smurfs, 1981 to 1989. For most of the 80s, the Smurfs was pastoral fantasy. Blue villagers, mushroom homes, gentle morals, and Gargamel's bumbling schemes. Then, late in the decade, the show pivoted to serialized time travel arcs. Overnight, Smurf Village broadened into a historical playground. Ancient civilizations, legendary figures, and butterfly effect lessons. The setting reset transformed the series from cozy loops into mini-sagas where choices echoed across eras. The move was partly survival strategy. After so many years, fatigue set in, and time travel cracked open fresh engines for stories while still preserving the show's kind-hearted spirit. Background art expanded into cathedrals, ships, and deserts, while Papa Smurf's rules of magic began to resemble science fiction equations. Some broadcasters nudged the edges, ensuring peril scenes wrapped quickly and monsters were designed to look less frightening, while critics occasionally raised eyebrows about the fantasy magic. What stood out, though, was how seamlessly the Smurfs' values adapted to grander adventures. Community, empathy, and problem-solving were constant, whether in a medieval castle or on a ship's deck. For longtime viewers, the sudden departure from the forest was disorienting, but for newcomers, it was a thrill. The Smurfs' survival across the transition shows just how much elasticity even the gentlest brands can hold. Alvin and the Chipmunks, 1983 to 1990, from sitcom to parody anthology. Early Chipmunks episodes were pop-juke musicals wrapped in family sitcom beats, school mishaps, sibling rivalries, and Dave's exasperated Alvin. Mid-run, the series morphed into movie parody anthologies, peaking with the Chipmunks Go-to-the-Movies format. Suddenly, each week was a playful riff, classic adventures, sci-fi send-ups, noir pastiches, complete with costumes, sets, and rearranged hits. This wasn't just surface decoration, it was a structural overhaul. The show moved away from status quo resets and embraced one-off universes where the Chipmunks and Chipettes could embody entirely new characters. It allowed for richer visuals, wider comedic range, and kept their pop song formula alive in endlessly flexible ways. It also sidestepped legal headaches by parodying genres instead of paying for direct homages. Of course, reruns later ran into music rights issues, trimming certain songs, or swapping out tracks. Some international edits even retooled visuals to avoid brand clashes. But the experiment worked. By turning into a genre playground, Alvin and the Chipmunks became an early classroom in cinema literacy for kids. It gave the characters new relevance, proving that even the squeakiest trio could reinvent themselves. And it forecast the meta-parody boom of the 1990s. Jem and the Holograms, 1985 to 1988. Jem began as a neon fairy tale of identity, Jerrica balancing her holographic alter ego against the rival band, the Misfits, with morals woven into glittery spectacle. Then the Stingers arrived. With them came new love triangles, contract battles, and cutthroat maneuvers that turned a glamorous rivalry into something sharper. The show's mood shifted into serialized consequences, where what happened in one episode bled into the next. The visual design evolved to match sharper silhouettes, black and gold motifs, and music videos that doubled as emotional storytelling. Instead of simple be-yourself parables, episodes began exploring fame's toll, how loyalty frays under pressure, and the personal cost of chasing stardom. Networks still kept a close eye, insisting on consequences for risky behavior and softening moments that edged too close to menace. Some international broadcasts even edited scenes involving stunts or aggressive confrontation. For fans, though, the arrival of the Stingers marked the moment Jem matured. It was no longer just toy commercial sparkle, it was drama with teeth. That pivot foreshadowed the prestige teen dramas of the following decade, and it remains one of the boldest mid-series reinventions of the 1980s cartoon landscape. G.I. Joe, a real American hero, 1983 to 1986, from war stories to sci-fi fantasies. The early years of G.I. Joe were rooted in military adventure, camouflage heroes, high-tech vehicles, and Cobra schemes that, while colorful, still drew from war movie DNA. But midway through, the show pivoted toward flamboyant sci-fi, almost reinventing itself. Suddenly, there were underground serpent kingdoms, DNA experiments resurrecting historical villains, and plots that felt more like space operas than tactical warfare. Characters like Serpentor, bred from history's conquerors, shifted the tone from grounded heroics to pulp myth. This change wasn't accidental. Toy lines were expanding, and Hasbro's new figures demanded story hooks to match. Out went gritty sabotage arcs. In came outlandish battlefields and mutant armies. Animation mirrored the transformation, with more neon hues, bizarre lairs, and exotic landscapes. For some kids, it made the series unforgettable, larger than life and endlessly imaginative. For others, it felt like a betrayal of the show's original spirit, trading strategy and suspense for wild spectacle. Networks also stepped in, keeping violence sanitized. Laser weapons replaced bullets. Characters parachuted to safety, and the catchphrase, "Knowing is half the battle," ensured morality lessons capped the chaos. Yet, despite these restrictions, G.I. Joe became an enduring cultural artifact, its mid-series shift showing how quickly a show could morph to align with marketing and still define a generation. Voltron, Defender of the Universe, 1984 to 1985. Reassembled from the inside out. Voltron captured imaginations instantly, giant robot lions fusing into a cosmic warrior, fighting monstrous forces of evil. But partway through, the series transformed in a startling way. The first run centered on the Lion Force, with 5 pilots whose teamwork forged the iconic Voltron. Then came the Vehicle Force Voltron, a completely different setup with 15 pilots, a space exploration theme, and a very different tone. The change was rooted in international production. The original Japanese series had 2 separate shows, and American producers fused them under the Voltron banner. For kids watching week to week, though, the tonal shift was abrupt. Suddenly, the core characters were gone, replaced by a new crew with more complicated dynamics and less magical flair. The pacing became heavier, the action more sprawling, and the charm of the lions was missed by many. Censorship also played its role. Darker material from the Japanese source was cut or softened, especially battle deaths. The edits made some arcs disjointed, adding to the sense of discontinuity. Still, the bold retooling cemented Voltron as a franchise that could survive reinvention. Even though fans largely preferred the Lion Force, the show's willingness to change midstream proved that children's television could bend identities and still command loyalty. Thundercats, 1985 to 1989, from fantasy warriors to outer space oddities. Thundercats started as pure fantasy adventure, mythic heroes, sword magic, and a blend of Conan-like battles with moral lessons. But as the series wore on, the show began steering into stranger territory. Later seasons introduced bizarre aliens, surreal settings, and narrative arcs that took the Thundercats far from their initial mythic world. Lion-O's leadership trials, once straightforward rites of passage, gave way to cosmic battles and episodes that felt like different genres stitched together. This change was fueled partly by production fatigue. To sustain fresh episodes, writers leaned on increasingly far-out concepts, drifting from the rich sword and sorcery roots. Toy tie-ins pushed the evolution too, with new characters and playsets requiring fresh settings. The once tight balance between medieval mystique and moral storytelling stretched into sci-fi weirdness. Censors kept the combat in check. Swords clashed but rarely wounded. Monsters looked menacing but dissolved or retreated safely. Parents' groups raised eyebrows at the darker imagery, pushing networks to soften or reframe some arcs. Still, the transformation gave Thundercats a cult reputation. Fans remember not just its thunderous opening theme, but its wild willingness to break its own mold and reach into stranger, more experimental realms. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 1987 to 1996. The Red Sky Reinvention. When Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles hit screens in 1987, it was goofy fun, pizza-loving turtles, pratfall villains, and a bright comic book palette. But by its 8th season, the show stunned fans with a complete tonal shift. The skies literally turned crimson. The humor was pared back, and the Shredder-Krang antics gave way to darker plots and more serious threats. This era, dubbed the Red Sky Seasons, marked a radical reinvention. The change reflected a waning audience. Ratings were slipping, and producers gambled that an edgier style might revive interest. New villains brought more menace, and battles took on higher stakes. Even the Turtles' banter sharpened, less quippy and more determined. Yet broadcast guidelines still reined things in. Blades were rarely shown cutting, blasters remained non-lethal, and consequences often reset to preserve safety. International broadcasts trimmed scenes further, leaving some episodes fragmented. Still, the rebrand left a lasting cultural footprint. For younger viewers, it was too intense. For older fans, it finally gave the Turtles the grit of their comic book roots. The dual identity of TMNT, half comedy, half drama, can be traced directly to this mid-series gamble. The Real Ghostbusters, 1986 to 1991. From spooky to silly. The Real Ghostbusters launched with a darkly thrilling tone. Ghosts were eerie, stories carried genuine suspense, and the writing gave weight to busting the supernatural. But network executives soon worried it was too scary for children. Enter a mid-series overhaul, lighter storylines, brighter color schemes, and the sidelining of darker imagery in favor of goofy ghouls. Even the characters shifted. Janine's tough, sharp-edged personality was softened, while Slimer ballooned into a comic mascot. Fans quickly noticed the difference. Early episodes leaned toward horror fantasy, with teeth, almost anthology-like in mood. Later seasons, however, tilted into slapstick comedy, robbing the show of its edge. The change was meant to appeal to a broader audience, but it left longtime viewers disappointed. Censors demanded that scares never cross into genuine horror, and action was softened to keep the danger cartoonish. Yet, despite the transformation, the show endured long enough to cement itself as one of the defining cartoons of the decade. Its shifting identity, from moody ghost tales to Saturday morning comedy, remains a classic example of how executive anxieties could rewrite a show mid-flight. Muppet Babies, 1984 to 1991. From imagination to clip show overload. Muppet Babies began with a brilliant conceit. The nursery became a limitless playground where imagination turned cardboard boxes into spaceships, and daydreams segued into wild adventures. Early episodes struck a perfect balance of humor, warmth, and inventive storytelling, with Nanny's off-screen presence tying it all together. But as the series continued, production leaned harder on incorporating live-action stock footage and classic film clips. At first, the mashups felt magical. Seeing Cartoon Piggy or Kermit interact with scenes from Star Wars or Raiders of the Lost Ark was mind-blowing to kids. Yet over time, reliance on these clips grew, crowding out original animated sequences. Some episodes became little more than frameworks built to house montages, making the imaginative spark feel thinner. Network pressure and budget considerations fed the change. Using pre-existing footage was cheaper than animating new scenarios, and it doubled as brand synergy. Still, fans sensed the creative well narrowing. Overseas broadcasters occasionally cut or swapped clips due to rights issues, creating uneven versions of episodes. Despite the detour, Muppet Babies left a cultural stamp few cartoons could rival. It showed that kids' media could blend nostalgia with invention, even if the balance shifted too far toward clip reels in its later years. For those who watched, the early seasons remained golden, pure imagination set free. The later seasons serve as a cautionary tale. When corporate efficiency overrides creativity, the soul of a show can quietly change midstream. DuckTales, 1987 to 1990. From pulp adventure to gadget-driven comedy, DuckTales soared onto screens with swashbuckling energy. Scrooge McDuck leading Huey, Dewey, and Louie on globe-trotting treasure hunts, battling curses, rival billionaires, and supernatural foes. The early seasons had the spirit of Indiana Jones with feathered charm. But as the series progressed, the focus gradually shifted from daring exploration to zany, invention-heavy comedy driven by side characters like Gyro Gearloose and Bubba Duck. The change wasn't abrupt, but cumulative. Later episodes leaned less on mythic adventure arcs and more on domestic sitcom energy in Duckburg. Bubba, introduced as a prehistoric child companion, was meant to freshen the lineup, but for many fans, his antics pulled focus from Scrooge's world-spanning quests. The once globe-hopping narrative began to feel smaller, less dangerous, and more gadget-oriented. Broadcast standards also softened the peril. Early tomb-raiding episodes occasionally flirted with genuine suspense, but later installments emphasized slapstick pratfalls over life-or-death stakes. International edits clipped scenes with sharper edge, further sanding down the show's adventurous bite. Even with these shifts, DuckTales redefined what children's animation could aspire to. It proved serialized arcs, high-quality animation, and theatrical storytelling could live on weekday afternoons. Fans may still debate the Bubba era, but no one denies DuckTales remains one of the most influential cartoons of the 1980s, its mid-series turn only adding texture to its long legacy. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, 1983 to 1985. The toy line takes over. When He-Man first exploded onto screens, it was sword and sorcery heroics with a toy line backbone. The early episodes balanced mythic quests with moral lessons, He-Man's valor tempered by wisdom, and Skeletor's evil played with just enough camp. Yet midway through, the storytelling shifted noticeably. The toy line's relentless expansion meant new characters constantly entered, many written less as personalities and more as advertisements for fresh plastic figures. Episodes once focused on themes of courage, responsibility, and teamwork turned into revolving spotlights on whoever had just debuted on store shelves. Whole adventures were built to showcase vehicles or gadgets with dialogue written to highlight their abilities. Skeletor remained a fixture, but the emotional core, Prince Adam's dual life and responsibility, faded into a cycle of episodic toy showcases. Censors still ensured moral lessons tagged every episode, and violence remained symbolic. Energy blasts, quick reversals, and villains retreating. But the dilution was obvious. The universe grew crowded, the moral heart dimmed, and what started as an almost mythological parable became a commercial carousel. Even so, He-Man left behind an empire. It showed the raw power of synergy between toys and television, and it sparked debates that still echo about whether art can thrive under merchandising's thumb. For many kids, the shift went unnoticed. They loved every new warrior, every new beast. For adults looking back, though, the mid-series transformation marks the moment He-Man became more brand than myth. Transformers, 1984-1987. The movie reset. Transformers captivated audiences with its mechanical soap opera. Autobots versus Decepticons, Optimus Prime's noble leadership, Megatron's relentless scheming, and the thrill of cars, planes, and boomboxes that could turn into warriors. Mid-series, however, the franchise detonated its own foundation with Transformers, the movie in 1986. Optimus Prime was killed off, Megatron was reborn as Galvatron, and a new roster of Autobots, Hot Rod, Cup, Ultra Magnus, took center stage. This wasn't just a plot twist, it was a corporate strategy. Hasbro wanted to retire older toys and replace them with new ones, and the movie acted as the reset button. But the shockwaves were immense. Young viewers traumatized by Prime's death never saw the show the same way again, and the series' tone darkened. The TV episodes that followed leaned into cosmic lore, Unicron's shadow, and the grittier Galvatron arc. Censorship forced the violence to remain stylized, but the movie's legacy lingered. It had shown children that their heroes could die. Some countries even edited later broadcasts, softening the tragedy or reframing arcs. Yet culturally, the shift cemented Transformers as more than toy marketing. It became myth. Optimus Prime's sacrifice etched itself into pop culture memory, and the franchise's willingness to rewrite itself mid-run paved the way for decades of reinvention. The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, 1986 to 1987, a radical reboot within. Johnny Quest was already a legacy property by the 80s, but the real adventures of Johnny Quest took bold steps into modernity. The first season introduced an older Johnny, Haji stripped of mysticism, Jessie as a capable ally, and a blend of globe-trotting science and cybertech. But when the second season hit, everything changed again. Characters lost a year, Haji's mystical powers returned. Dr. Quest suddenly regained his fiery red hair and fighting prowess, and Jessie, once written as independent, was increasingly cast in traditional damsel roles. The tonal reset was jarring. Fans who appreciated the grounded contemporary approach felt cheated, while those nostalgic for the original series were pleased to see echoes of the old formula. The aesthetic shifted too. Darker shading and more realistic threats gave way to brighter palettes and simpler conflicts. Production chaos fueled the reinvention. Creative disputes and executive decisions pulled the show in two competing directions, and the mid-series overhaul reflected that tug-of-war. Broadcast edits clipped some of the more intense moments from Season 1, while later episodes softened action to emphasize safer adventure. In the end, Johnny Quest's radical swing made it a cautionary tale. Reinvention can refresh a series, but abrupt reversals risk alienating both old and new fans. Still, its mid-run transformation is legendary in cartoon history, an emblem of the unpredictable, experimental energy of the 1980s animation boom. From toy-driven resets to tone swaps that baffled loyal viewers, these 15 cartoons prove that the 1980s was an era of constant reinvention. Some changes saved shows, others nearly sank them, but all left lasting marks. Which transformation shocked you the most? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the countdown next time.